Springfest at Lowe's means can't miss savings for your home and lawn. Right now, buy 3 bags, get 3 free on Miracle-Gro 3/4 cubic foot all-purpose garden soil. Plus, buy 2, get 1 free on select exterior paint and stain via mail-in rebate. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 4/16, excludes Alaska and Hawaii. While supplies last, selection varies by location. See rebate form for complete list of eligible products. Offer excludes clearance and mistints and can't be combined with any other offer, promotion, discount, or coupon.
I mean, they kind of hit that jackpot of an original idea on broadcast, 22 episodes, and then it works, and then you have a universe on your hands, right?
Yeah, the country television universe that they're building out there, and it's working for them.
It's great.
It's the dream in Hollywood, right?
Welcome to the Ankler Podcast. I'm Elaine Lowe, one of the authors of the series Business Newsletter, coming to you from Los Angeles on Thursday, April 10th. Pretty much the whole Ankler team was in Vegas for our first ever Business of Entertainment partnership with NAB show this week, hosting no fewer than 9 onstage conversations with the best and brightest in the business, talking to everyone from WWE's Nick Khan and Triple H to Universal Music Group Publishing's Jody Gerson, where we learned a lot about the new power centers in the industry. Sean McNulty's under the weather today, so let's welcome back like and subscribe creator, economy reporter Natalie Jarvie, plus a very special guest, our own fearless leader and Ankler editor-in-chief Janice Min. Natalie and Janice, welcome.
Hi, I'm just back from Las Vegas. More than one night in Las Vegas is a little hard, I'm not going to lie.
I always feel like a desiccated, just dry husk after more than 48 hours in Vegas.
One night in Vegas is all you need. That's my strong opinion.
But you know who spent a little too much time in Vegas was Sean McNulty, who, poor guy, after 10 days, is not with us today because his
it
back
sounds like he
is
died, Elaine. He's
no longer with us, but will be with us. He's just on a plane back to New York right now.
He's not on this podcast. Wait, so let's explain how Sean ended up spending 10 days in Vegas and why he's not on this podcast. He started at CinemaCon. Then we asked him to stay so he could close out NAB with the conversation, moderating the conversation with Triple H and Nick Khan from WWE.
And unfortunately threw out his back in the process.
Yes, but can I give some props to some people who really helped out Sean? Sean ended up, thanks to, we asked the WWE people if they had any medical people they could recommend in Vegas, and they sent Sean to, which is very entertaining, the UFC medical facility. So he got treated by people who probably see back injuries routinely. And Heather was amazing. Sean got back up on his feet and was able to fly home today.
Oh, amazing. That's good to know. But yes, people who probably see back injuries more from, well, I guess it's UFC, so it's not WWE. There's no chair smashing on backs, but probably backs that are hurt in, not just from sitting on a panel with Tom Staggs all morning.
It sounds like what you're saying, Janice, is that Sean has recovered faster than the stock market.
Touche.
Yeah. Speaking of which, before we talk a little bit more about Vegas, can I just say what a wild ride we've been on this week? I mean, the threat of tariffs, a trade war, all of that's been rattling our 401ks, but it's also rattled folks here in the entertainment industry, especially with China reducing the import of Hollywood films in response to Trump's tariffs. Janice, what are your takeaways here on the uncertainty? I mean, I feel like all the uncertainty in an industry that really doesn't need more uncertainty right now, right?
Well, Elaine, I thought you did some really good reporting this week about how this tariff threat, whether, now it's been postponed, who knows what's really going to happen with it outside of China. But you reported on how, obviously all of these economies are intertwined at this point, and the cost of production is going to suffer enormously if these tariffs go through because people are getting lights from China, fabric from Italy for costumes. I mean, LED lights from another European country. So all these things are intertwined. So it just created another moment of existential crisis, I think, for a lot of people here. Luckily, hopefully, this 90 days becomes 900 days, but we'll see. This 90-day break.
I mean, especially with the impact it'll have on ad spending, where like 3 weeks before upfronts right now. I mean, that's real crumb timing for this all to be happening right before the biggest media spend event of the year.
You're heading to New York for upfronts, right? And
I am. I'll be very curious to hear what the buyers of Madison Avenue think of all this.
well, the economy hates uncertainty, right? And uncertainty is what we have right now. And I think that's going to be, I've heard many people use the phrase roller coaster, and buckle up. I think that is where we'll be, at least for the short term here.
Yeah, especially when you add to that just the Trump administration also terminating most of the federal grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And we're really starting to see some of the impact of policy hitting home. It's left a lot of artists in limbo, particularly documentarians who got their funding axed. But we are, of course, as ever, covering this tariff saga and everything else as it evolves. So make sure you check out theankler.com for the latest. But moving on from tariffs, let's go back to Vegas, the bubble that is Vegas. We learned a lot at NAB about where this business is headed and which parts of the entertainment industry are finding pockets of stability and growth, and also just like these emerging markets. Natalie, I know you talked to the folks at Webtoon, which is a platform for comic creators who make as much as $1 million outside of the traditional ways of getting published. Tell us about that.
Yeah, one of the most fun parts about this job, writing about creators and digital media, is that every now and then a company can surprise you. You can learn about a platform that, I was aware of Webtoon, but you can all of a sudden discover that, yeah, people are building real careers and making, huge amounts of money on this platform. And it's just now starting to kind of take off in the US. So Webtoon is a webcomic platform. It's been really popular in Korea in particular for a number of years. And now it is starting to, creep into the United States and Canada and, find English language audiences. And, the people who are making these webcomics through what they call microtransactions. So, you'll pay pennies to read a new episode or installment of a story.
Right, like instead of an annual subscription.
Exactly. They're on average making around $50,000 a year. And, for the top creators, can make $1 million a year.
But Natalie, you're kind of bearing the lead of this, which is how this ties back to traditional Hollywood entertainment, is that these shows that you and I and everyone have heard of on Netflix were born out of IP that was first scouted on Webtoon. So what's the list? It's Heartstopper, right?
Heartstopper is a big one, really popular YA show on Netflix. The Kissing Booth was originally. So Webtoon also owns a platform called Wattpad, which is similar, but for user-submitted stories as opposed to comics. So some of these were Wattpad stories first. Some of them were Webtoon stories first. But Kissing Booth is another popular one. A very popular Tubi show that came out around Thanksgiving last year, or not show, movie.
I think you said it was the most watched program on Tubi in history.
In the first 7 days, yeah. It had a huge launch for them. It was called Sidelined, The QB and Me, and it was based on a very popular Wattpad story, and they're making a sequel right now. They're just finishing production. It'll be back on Tubi by this fall. So, Hollywood's always looking for places to mine new IP, and here is this huge untapped vault of stories that people have already shown they love. They'll pay money to read them. So that's, hugely powerful for Webtoon as they start to think about moving more of their stories through that pipeline.
Oh, that's got to be a really interesting area for agents, too, when they're looking for new talent, to think that you're finding them in these little online pockets right now, like Webtoon and Wattpad, which I guess are actually not quite so little anymore.
Well, Elaine, I think one of the themes of our programming in the Business of Entertainment track at NAB was, I think you could really look at who we asked to speak, right? And you can see the shifting fortunes of Hollywood and who has the power. And I think, who would have thought that 5 years ago WWE was the biggest, was going to be changing the whole sports environment, that it would be on Netflix, that Netflix would pay the amount of money it was paying.
A $5 billion multi-year deal on Netflix. I mean, it's their main recurring live sporting event. Who would have thought that that'd be Netflix's first foray?
Right. And so they were doing this a little bit as a warm-up. Nick Khan, the president, and Triple H, and by the way, who were both amazing on stage. And they were doing it as a little bit of a warm-up to WrestleMania, which is coming to Las Vegas in a couple weekends. And that's going to end up being like one of the most massive live events probably of the year. So that you're seeing the growth of a sport like that. But I want to say that the common theme to me among all our speakers Oh, I should bring up like Jane Rosenthal, who runs Tribeca Enterprises, which runs the Tribeca Film Festival, but she also programs the Sphere, which was right there in view of the Las Vegas Convention Center. So it's about sort of creating these new experiences about how to find audience. But the common thing that I loved about what everyone said was it was about storytelling. And storytelling is taking all these new forms and might be in new formats, but that is the essential, like that is a thing that AI can't replicate. It's something that technology can't change. And so all these great storytellers are finding new ways to make money off of what they do.
Yeah, and we're going to get back into that because there are some things that interestingly are still working. And I think a lot of the conversations that I have around town are like, hey, what's old is new again. And there are certain things that had been working for a while that kind of went out of vogue or I'm back in vogue. So you're seeing both ends of the spectrum of these very old school ways of doing business and these new school ways of doing business. And again, it's the middle that gets squeezed here. But yes, going back to the whole live event space, you look at the Sphere, you look at WWE, these are the things that are working right now. These are the things that are getting eyeballs. And key to that is also advertisers right now in this age where we're all about seeing ads and ad tiers again.
It's all about what's the most in-demand content, right? I mean, in this world where everything is on demand, you have to create excitement for something. And so, of course, these big live productions are what are getting people excited because there's nothing that can replicate, the experience of watching a live sporting event, as it's happening, not knowing the outcome, or, going to something like the Sphere and seeing a concert, in this amazing venue. You can't get that on TikTok. As much as people, I watch a lot of concert footage on TikTok, you can't replicate the experience of the Sphere online.
No, I mean, and let's talk about, the Sphere bringing The Wizard of Oz, a movie that's, how old at this point? 70, 80 years old. They're bringing that movie remastered, reconfigured to the Sphere. Like that it really shows you the power of a story.
Right. To think that that's the big draw.
Right.
And speaking of disruptors and outsiders, our own Richard Rushfield had a great column this week on 4 outsiders who are fixing what traditional Hollywood won't. So make sure you all read that. When we get back, we're going to talk more about the parts of the legacy industry that are working with audiences and the power of IP and where this is all headed in these uncertain times. We'll be back right after the break.
TaxAct knows small business owners can sometimes use a little help with their taxes. That's why TaxAct has Expert Assist, a team of live tax experts ready to answer any questions you may have. Think of them as your own personal sidekick. Not like one of those funny talking animal sidekicks, more like the super smart nerding out on tax code and business casual attire sidekick, but just as helpful and lovable. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
Hi, I'm Ashley Collins, and I write the Dealmakers newsletter for The Ankler. Dealmakers guides readers through the intricate workings of lawyers, agents, and bankers, with insights exclusive to The Ankler covering the fast-changing state of deals, film finance, M&A, and the new frontier of AI law. I also interview some of the biggest names behind the industry's headlines, the people moving the entertainment industry forward, one DocuSign at a time. Dealmakers comes out every other Tuesday as part of a paid subscription to The Ankler. So please join me by subscribing today at theankler.com.
Welcome back to the Ankler Podcast. I'm Elaine Lowe here with Janice Min and Natalie Jarvie talking about the new paths to success in Hollywood as evidenced by what we saw at NAB in Vegas. There's a lot of change in the air. We've talked a little bit about the creator economy, live events, but I talked to a couple of development executives at CBS for one of these panels, as well as the co-creators and executive producers of Fire Country. And it's so funny to see this boom in procedurals, right? It's like of all the things that are like in vogue right now, it's your crime shows, it's your medical shows, like everybody's talking about The Pit on Max. And there's a real what's old is new again vibe that just happens to be resonating with viewers. I guess it's like comfort food, right?
For sure. It feels like comfort food. It feels familiar. I also think that, if you're competing with TikTok and YouTube, like these closed-ended episodes where you can watch and finish a story in 30 minutes or an hour have become really appealing. Also, I think you can watch procedurals with your family in a multi-generational way.
I mean, the number of Ankler staffers that are also Matlock fans, I feel like it's surprisingly disproportionate, right?
I think this is a myth. I don't know where this fact has come up from, I do know a few people on our team who watch Matlock. But when everyone's buried in their small screen, it feels good to sit down on a sofa with your friends or other members of your family and watch something together.
Yeah, we're recording this. Elaine, you mentioned The Pit. Today is the finale of the first season of The Pit. And I can't remember the last time so many people in my life and online were talking about and excited for a show like this. And, I think it has really been helped by the fact that it has come out weekly. But, there's been this buildup. Like, people are excited to watch the finale tonight. And that's really fun. And it feels communal in a way that, to Janice's point about, TikTok and the internet, these algorithms on the internet can feed you exactly what you want, but that means that you might not be watching the same thing as, as your partner, as your friend, as your boss. And it's fun to have something that everyone is talking about and everyone is excited about.
I mean, can you imagine that in early 2025, one of the hottest shows would be a weekly medical hospital drama starring Noah Wyle?
It's amazing. It's wild. But Elaine, you spoke to creators of a hit procedural that didn't exist. How new is that show where you had the creators on main stage?
So Fire Country creators, Tony Phelan and Joan Rader, they're in the third season, just got renewed for a fourth, and then they're spinning it off. Fire Country is also Sheriff Country, and it's about, so Fire Country started off as this show about this young convict who's enrolled in this firefighters program in order to reduce his prison sentence. But he's, in a small town. It turns out he comes from a family of firefighters. It's really taken off with audiences to the point where they're spinning it off into Sheriff Country, and they're looking at another part of the small town. And it's sort of part of the very CBS fabric of like, let's create a whole franchise, a whole universe out of this. But it's also original programming, which is just such an interesting balance of how the business is done these days. And, Joan and Tony were talking about kind of the luxury of having 22 episodes to build this out, but also the way that procedurals have been evolving so that there's more serialized elements, there's soapier elements, so that it's not completely closed-ended anymore. Because, before you'd like watch CSI or something and it'd be like case of the week, and then they would solve the case, and you could not watch 5 episodes and like come to a new one and you wouldn't miss anything. But now there's like family stories and other things that are being woven in, which they say helps with the streaming audience for people who want to binge watch. So the procedurals are working, but they're also evolving.
I mean, they kind of hit that jackpot of an original idea on broadcast, 22 episodes, and then it works, and then you have a universe on your hands, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the country television universe that they're building out there, and it's working for them.
It's great.
It's the dream in Hollywood, right? You get that show, I mean, you'll start to get those residuals, and you're set for life. And it's exciting that that's something that can still happen even right now when we're talking a lot about, budget cuts and not many shows, as many shows making it on the air, or, not as many shows, finding audiences in general. So that's fun.
Yeah. And creating new IP too, because, you want to talk about something else that's always worked. What hasn't lost its magic is IP. Janice, you had a really fascinating conversation with Jody Gerson about music rights and how that plays into storytelling. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what Jody Gerson does at Universal Music Group Publishing, she's the chairman and CEO, and basically they own libraries of different musicians' catalogs. And what they do then is they do the syncs on those. So she brought up, for example, a really powerful sync they did on a Sting song that was sung by the choir in adolescence in this very powerful scene in adolescence. It's a Sting song called Fragile. But there was a video that really kind of moved the room where she showed the decades-long value of a song like Tiny Dancer from Elton John and how that's been exploited.
It's been covered so many different ways, so many different times, and they're all unique and
oh my God. From Glee to American Idol to, rappers. Like, I think there was an insurance commercial, and so that song has made so much money. But what I really love what Jody talked about was that, like, you cannot replicate like all of this, none of this money happens if you don't have like a great song and if you don't have like something that has this emotional connection to people. And that's something like, I said it a little bit earlier, but like, I don't think AI can do that. Technology can't do that. Those are all just ways that assist creativity, and hopefully she'll remain as such. But that idea that creative work can accrue in value through the years is an amazing thing. They have the Bob Dylan catalog at Universal Music Group Publishing, and she talked about how Bob Dylan's catalog has grown hugely in value since A Complete Unknown came out, and that it reintroduced Dylan to teenagers. I mean, obviously the casting of Timothée Chalamet was genius with that, but that you can look at sort of these creative endeavors as renewable is an amazing way to think about what Hollywood does best.
It is really interesting. I mean, obviously, both in music and in filmed entertainment, the advent of streaming at first was kind of this existential crisis. But what's so cool now is that when people are smart, when executives like Jody are smart or an executive in Hollywood is smart, now they can have that thing that exists. So, I started rewatching ER recently because of The Pit. I needed more Noah Wyle in my life. And that was there for me on Max and I could watch it. And it's the same thing. You go see A Complete Unknown and now you want to go, listen to all the original Bob Dylan songs. And there's real value there that you can continue to extract. And I feel like Hollywood and the music industry both have gotten better at figuring out how to do that in the age of streaming.
Yeah, and I think having those technological platforms too, when we talk about wanting to revisit some of those things, with music or TV, it's like before, if you wanted to revisit, you'd have to just like wait for the VHS set to like come out before you could watch it. And now everything's on demand.
I should bring up also in the WWE conversation, and it was great to hear Triple H talk, and he's so smart, talking about exactly how they develop their stars. It's all about story, right? And who has, for starters, let me back up and said, it starts with charisma. You can't fabricate charisma. You either have it or you don't. So they look for that charisma. But he said, like the first day of an audition, they try to break you. Like they work you out so hard that people are in agony. But he said that's when you really start to see what someone is made of. Are you someone who's a team player? Are you someone who's looking out for someone else? Are you someone who can withstand this? And there were all these sort of attributes they look for, but it was really sort of charisma and story. And are you someone's going to be attached to? But he really broke it down to just, it's like any other writer's room or any movie from the start of time. Like, are these characters who can transcend and become people are invested in?
Are these people you're going to root for? Are these people that you care about whether they win or lose, or what kind of family feud is going to pop up mid-season?
Right.
So, we talk a lot about sort of the quote unquote like power of storytelling, right? And like I think that's a term that gets tossed around a lot in the industry, and sometimes it's like a little bit of a band-aid or sort of this nebulous term, but really that is kind of what it comes down to. What we learned from all of the people we spoke to in Vegas of like, yeah, there is this very common thread and it has to be a story that captivates, but you also have to, on a business end, figure out how to be able to leverage that in a way that works and in a way that resonates, especially in this attention economy where so much of the time you're just competing with social media. And I guess, Natalie, obviously what you're covering is the creators who are on social, but it's been really interesting to see what kind of balance there is between the legacy and emerging markets here.
Yeah, what's so interesting is, going back to Wattpad and Webtoon, so much of what has worked for them are these kind of serialized stories. The authors on Webtoon are releasing new installments of their comics, I don't know how frequently, but like pretty regularly. And, you can go in and you can find this whole trove of, past installments. They call them episodes. That's serialized storytelling, just like it is in Hollywood. And, when you're sitting down and watching a TV show. And so to me, that says like, the fundamentals of what people want out of their entertainment is the same no matter what platform you're on. You want a good story. You want to be able to, kind of fall in love with characters and check in with them and live with them for like long periods of time. And, to me, like not to sound totally Pollyanna about it, but it does give me hope that, no matter what's happening in Hollywood, people will find the great stories and want to come to them. And, that there will always be these new kind of incubators of story. And, maybe even if superheroes are falling out of favor a little bit. Well, now we've got all these great web comics that you could turn into your next favorite Netflix show. And that's exciting and heartening to me.
Yeah, Janice, I think we saw, optimistically speaking, maybe some green shoots as we're going into what is probably going to be another kind of turbulent year here.
Well, what I'm optimistic about is I felt like we had a lot of conversations that revealed the power that creators have. And whether you're a writer in Hollywood or you have a great idea, that you are the holder of the keys, and you're seeing this flattening of the gatekeepers, right? That there's so many ways, thanks to technology, going back to my earlier point, that you can bypass the gatekeepers, the people who will say no to your show. I mean, and this is a theme we write about a lot here and talk about a lot, is that a publisher doesn't want to buy your book, we'll throw it on Webtoon. Maybe you'll have a hit. Or people don't like your song, a label won't sign you, put it up on TikTok or SoundCloud. And, these are ways that music is discovered. And I like the idea that the people get to choose what they like and what they don't like. And you don't need a layer of development executives or people writing advances to necessarily tell you that you're wrong or right. So I think that's really exciting. I think that, and Richard talked about this, just these outsiders, like that it will be outsiders who will remake the industry, that it's not going to, we've seen it. We know it's not going to be the studios. They're not going to do it because they are too big. It's too hard to steer the ship back around. So it will be these sort of, Richard talks about, I know for sure what, off the top of my head, Letterboxd, for example, which is remade marketing and where the audience is going to connect with movies and find their own fandom to coexist with. So in that way, like I can tell you, I feel really sure that the next wave of the next big things will be from people we don't even know today.
Yeah, and it's these outsiders. You talk about Letterboxd. It's these startups, these younger disruptors that don't have as much of a vested interest in keeping things the same way and keeping this very traditional infrastructure.
Yeah, they're not eating at the Polo Lounge. They're not like trying to get an introduction to an Oscar winner and, oh my God, maybe they'll like validate me. Like they don't care. Mm-hmm. And obviously Natalie writes about this with the creators. Like they don't care. Like that world is, for them, is not relevant. And I thought that, one of the things Jody Gerson talked about that was so interesting was like these new artists, like they're not so new, but like, like a Ariana Grande or Chappell Rowan or Billie Eilish, like they own their audience. The label doesn't own their audience anymore. They're the ones speaking to them directly through social media, day in, day out. They're fully in control of how they interact. And that in some ways is just another way of bypassing the gatekeepers. You are just going direct to consumer, even with your social media and building out your own fan base.
But there's also like a meeting in the middle, right? Like it's like you have all the legacy infrastructure, these legacy players, but they need to reach out to the younger folks. So there is this element of how do you interact with people on social media? How do you leverage social? And then you have these outside creators like the ones you cover, Natalie, who are coming from an outside track, but a lot of them still want and require the legitimacy of having, a TV show as an influencer or having a deal at an agency. So there's like some kind of like happy middle here where both of these sides will meet.
I think so. But, it is interesting. There was a study done 5 years ago or so now that, said that one of the most popular jobs among young people today is, content creator. And those people who are getting into it now aren't necessarily looking at it as a means to getting into Hollywood. It is the end goal, is being a massively popular TikToker or YouTuber or, Instagrammer. They don't necessarily need Hollywood to come calling. It's nice sometimes when they do. Certainly, everyone loves to be recognized for their work. So if that means you could maybe have an Emmy or, maybe your, relatives somewhere in the middle of the country who aren't paying attention to what you're doing are suddenly, watching you on Netflix or on CBS, like that's great. But it's not the end goal in the same way that it used to be. So Hollywood, I think, has to work a little harder to make the case for why creators should be with them. And I would imagine it's probably the same with like young music artists today. And you have to really have a compelling reason why they should bring their very digital first direct relationship with their audiences to these more legacy companies that need their help.
Well, listeners, if you want to weigh in, feel free to email us at podcasts@theankler.com. That's a wrap for us today, folks. Go to theankler.com to sign up for all of our newsletters and podcasts here. And if you like this show or have feedback for us, we would love to hear from you. So leave us a rating and review from wherever you get your pods. That helps the show grow, helps us reach new listeners. So we, of course, appreciate anything you have to say. And make sure you're following us on socials at The Ankler on all of your favorite social media platforms. Thanks again to Natalie Jarvie and Janice Min for joining me today. And of course, a special thanks to you all for listening. We'll see you next time.